So, hi David. What was your first computer?
My first computer. Okay. Well, we had an Apple II in the house.
Hmm.
That was my first computer that I owned. But my neighbor across the street had a Commodore 64, so that was really my first time really enjoying, computers myself. Although I didn't really get to program on that one, but we did make games together on
Made
that.
games
On that.
or you played games?
Both.
Okay.
So of course we loved, like Mule was our favorite game.
Okay.
Probably still one of my favorite games.
What is it?
Uh,
Mule?
Mule, yeah, it
Yeah.
was like this. It's a game where it's like an economic game,
Yeah.
and so everyone picks they mine minerals and they
Okay.
trade food and they harvest energy and they can trade it all in an open market and you can like collude and it's really kind of like there really aren't too many games like that even still.
And it was
Uh,
like on C64?
yeah, yeah, it was
Okay.
great. Yeah, it was a great game. And that was we would really love that one because we could work together. So my friend John and I we would play that one. Like we always like the games where you could cooperate.
Okay.
We didn't really like too much of those games where you would compete against each other.
So this was your first game you played?
No, not the first game. I had an Atari, of course.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Got that when
800?
I was
800?
yeah, and the 2600 and so yeah, the first games were of course like the standard Atari games, Pitfall
Hmm.
and Space Invaders, Pong, that kind of stuff.
I think my first contact with the computer was Atari 800 XL. No idea for what computer it was, but the game was like something with Egypt. So I had to to search for treasures or something like that with trapdoors and stuff. Like that. It was exciting. So for me back then, so that's exactly what I remember. Forgot the name.
Yeah, did you have to use a rope to go across a bunch of lakes with alligators in them?
I think so. Yes.
Okay, so that was probably the European branding of the game Pitfall.
A Pitfall. Okay. Yeah,
Yeah,
maybe. Yeah.
yeah. So it was like an Indiana Jones kind of a
Yeah.
thing
Yeah.
where,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
yeah, totally. Except they didn't call it Indiana Jones for obvious reasons.
Oh, okay. So this was my first uh, computer, and then I my first contact with the computer. And then I had ZX Spectrum, which is kind of C64, not as good but similar. And you played games, so you started with Atari, then C64, and then Apple II, right?
Yeah, so I had the Atari at my house,
Okay.
and then my friend had but I think it's a 2600 because you can't program a 2600; it's just cartridge only.
Okay.
So my friend across the street, John, he had the C64,
Hmm.
which we played on quite a bit. But we also did make games on that one for fun. There was like a Gary Kitchen's Game Maker package
Oh, okay.
that you could kind of program some stuff in. So you could program sprites and move them around the screen. We kind of made something that was like a Ghostbusters type of theme where you had to shoot ghosts, and it was very Space Invaders alike, but you know, uh, but it was fun. And then my parents were divorced. My dad had an an Apple II. So I got to play on that quite a bit when I was a kid. So that was a lot but it was an Apple, right? So I did a lot of, you know, paint shop
Hmm.
drawing of things in pixel at a time.
Back to the games. How you create the games? So I mean, there was obviously a kind of creator, but you had to program, right? It's not like
Yeah,
no
so
code.
my friend did the programming. So I didn't really get into
Ah,
any
okay.
kind of programming until like I was about 20, actually.
Wow. And how old
Yeah.
were you with the Pitfall?
Well, that was from the time that I was like 5 and onward, right? So
Ah,
surrounded by
okay.
computers my whole life, just didn't get into programming until much later.
That's interesting. So what you did, the first 15 years, so from 5 to 20, with the computers.
Well, a lot of stuff. So, uh, for I was always into a lot of different hobbies as a kid, and mostly around like media and
Okay.
movies or art or things like that. So I was like the creative art kid growing up. I wasn't necessarily the software kid. So about when I was 14, I joined started working at the public access station in the town.
What is
So
it?
public access is basically a local television station for government,
Oh, okay.
and so the city council meetings broadcast. They broadcast church.
Oh, okay.
So people who can't go into church, they can see, what's going on. They can basically participate over cable access. So it's kind of like YouTube for the local town,
Okay.
but on television.
Is it everywhere in the U.S. or was it special in your city?
No, most cities have them in the U.S.
Okay.
They're not. They're very low budget. They're just run by the city. They're run by the town you live in, and you might broadcast to the next 3 towns over. And then they recycle the channel for somebody else.
Okay.
So I started participating there, and I did a lot of video recording and editing, and I made a movie. So it wasn't a home movie because I was using TV studio equipment, and that public access station had a Amiga.
I found it.
And and so I did some special effects on the Amiga, which was really, really cool because it had fancy, video equipment. So, you got to draw on your movie with the Amiga. And the movie was Monday the 13th, part 36, Jason Takes the Old Folks Home. So there was a joke on Friday the 13th, but I thought Monday was much more scary than Friday. It's like Friday's a perfectly good day. Like the worst would be like Monday the 13th. So I did that. And the movie starts out where Jason is in a cornfield because in the previous movie he got killed by Iowan pig farmers. So he's in a farm and he's being used as a scarecrow. They just like set him up. So he's there, and the scarecrow thing gets struck by lightning. So I basically made the lightning with the Amiga, and it was like this bolt that shoots up, and we even in the middle of the shot, like it starts out as a wide shot and then it goes into a tight shot. And so I did a far away shot with the lightning coming down, and then his head pops up and light and electricity shoots around his eyes and leaves off of his face, and his eyes open up, and it's like.
How did it took to create such a thing? So you spent months doing this, or?
No, the whole thing was like a month.
Okay.
And the Amiga portion of it was probably about 3 days.
Okay.
Worth of work.
And from where you knew the cut, how to cut a movie, how to make it good? I mean, have you studied, I don't know, Kubrick, or you just watched other movies and tried to do the same, or?
Well, I mean, like a lot of kids, I did a lot of home movie stuff when I was, young, but that's why I joined the public access channel, because I wanted to keep making them better and better and better. It's just my personality. Like I'm always trying to push it further and further and further. That's just like who I am, I guess,
Okay.
So yeah, we would do the standard home movie stuff at home, with cameras and tilting the camera to make it look like, you're sitting in a chair or you're doing push-ups, when really you just tilted the camera and you've put a chair up against the wall, and then you look like you're defying gravity, and tricks like that, and stop motion stuff, with clay, and we would of course pause the camera, remove things from the set or ourselves, and keep the camera going, and things would just magically disappear. We built lots of props and things like that. We did all sorts of creative stuff like that. So we were kind of like YouTube kids really, really early. And the camera wasn't even mine. I didn't even have a camera. It was my friend's uncle's camera. So when his uncle came over, then we got to spend like the whole day making videos. And so, we would get good at like putting this all together as quickly as we possibly could. But that movie that I did I was a freshman in high school when I did that one.
Okay.
15.
And you got feedback, or I mean, was the movie broadcasted? What happened with the movie? I mean,
yeah, it was broadcast over the public access channel.
Yeah.
And so people got to see it, and it was on quite a bit because there wasn't really any original programming. So I mean, like there was original programming, but it was really boring stuff. Like I say, the city council meeting, the church ceremony, sermons, and stuff like that. I did other things for the station too. There was.
And you got feedback? It's like the people said, exciting thing, and
yeah. I would like be walking around in town, and I wasn't in the movie myself.
No.
But people knew that I made it, and so like once in a while, someone would come up to me, "Hey, you made that thing that I'm seeing all the time on TV." And like, yeah, I did that. That's like that's so cool. Oh, thank you so much. So that was really kind of cool.
What town was it? What city was it?
I was born in River Falls, Wisconsin, so I'm a
Wisconsin,
Midwesterner. Okay. Yeah.
And is it like large city, large town, or?
Oh, it's a huge city, 12,000 people.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I can imagine.
Massive.
Okay. So one church?
Many.
Multiple.
Yeah, at least like 5.
Okay. Yeah. Very interesting. So you started, to broadcast movies and make movies. So what happened afterwards? So you were around 15, you said?
Yep. So I transitioned into like special effects makeup and things like that. So I did that for a while. So yeah. And I was a kind of interesting kid. So I had a music studio. I got a music studio when I was about 15, and I shared it with a bunch of friends. Had that for all of high school.
What means music studio?
So I was taking guitar lessons, and my guitar teacher had a studio space where he could practice with his band, and they moved out, and I decided that I wanted to take it over. So I got a couple friends together so I could afford the rent, and we split the rent. And so we were teenagers who had our own space in the downtown of River Falls, and eventually, like, that whole floor opened up with all bands, because like once one set of kids has a studio space, all the other kids want to get together and try and rent it. So like a whole thing was filled with bands. And during Halloween, I was still into, even though I was doing music things, I was still into making movies and that kind of stuff. And I got into special effects makeup, like kind of gruesome stuff, and noses, and people making dress up like a troll or whatever, looking like you're dead or a zombie or whatever. So every Halloween, that was like a working day for me. I would have a line going out the studio, and I would try to get as many people done as I possibly could. And they would just come in, tell me what they wanted, and I would just, do it. And they would go off, and, I'd charge them like $20, and that was it.
Very good.
And, so I did that for several years in a row. And, the transition to computers is a whole different deal, but.
Yeah, but I assume you didn't play classic guitar, right?
No. I played mostly blues.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird thing. So I was born in 76, so that was prime Metallica years. And I do love Metallica, but I went to see a B.B. King concert at my freshman year in high school, and it blew me away. I mean, he was younger then, and he didn't sit down like everyone saw him in his last few years. He was standing up, his band was just pumping, and he had the most amazing energy on stage. His face would twist and contort when he was bending those notes, and it was just like, I was floored. So I started learning blues because I really loved it. And I just went down the blues rabbit hole and listened to a lot of people like Albert Collins. I was really into Albert Collins, still am, and Albert King. And then, friends turned me on to Stevie Ray Vaughan, and of course, liked that a lot. And his influences were Albert King quite a bit, and a lot of other people. And so I just played a lot of that. And so I kind of lost track of popular music really early in high school. So as people started to get into grunge and stuff like that in the 90s, I was already kind of working my way back in musical history from blues and eventually into jazz and stuff like that.
Yeah, B.B. King is actually really great. So The Thrill Is Gone is a great song from him, I think.
Yeah, definitely. He won a Grammy for that one. It's pretty great.
And he did also some records with Eric Clapton.
Yep. Yeah, so Riding with the King was...
Yeah, Riding with the King, exactly.
Yeah.
And I saw actually a concert from B.B. King. But
Did you really?
Yeah, one of the last, he was in Munich. I think it was like, 7 years ago or something like this.
Okay, yeah.
It was still great.
He's really good. I mean, I've seen him 3 times.
Okay.
since then, in total. So the first one, and then some twice more after that. Yeah, he kind of got a little bit slower and a little
Yeah.
bit. He started to sit down, and
Yeah.
then but he was always good because his music is kind of like about the pauses.
Exactly.
He really is good about leaving some air
Mhm.
and then hitting that note. So that's you can do that when you're older. It's really good. If he had the musical style where he was just continuously shredding all the time,
Yeah.
I think it would have been really hard for him to continue his
And
career.
the Mr. Albert Collins, what you said, this is the guy who did Blue is Blue, right? The song. It
I don't
was.
know.
This is like I think he is, and yeah, interesting that he also like blues. I also like blues, and there's
Oh
also
yeah,
a great movie, Crossroads. You know that
yeah. I
with
like that one.
yeah,
It's
interesting.
Ralph Macchio, I think.
Yeah, this is
Was
the
he in
guy.
that?
Yeah,
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 from
yeah,
Karate Kid.
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
so you and were you good in blues? I mean, could you play from BB King something, or I mean, how good were you?
Well, I was good. So like, I mean, good enough, not phenomenal. I mean, at times good, right? At times really good. So we used to like to play "The Sky Is Crying." That was one of
Mhm.
my favorite ones. Couldn't stand the weather. Um,
Mhm.
stuff like that. Obviously, I was not good enough to play like "Scuttle Button" from Stevie Ray Vaughan. That's like way
Mhm.
really hard song. But some of his easier songs were no problem. "Cold Shot" was one of my favorites to
Okay.
play.
And Jimi Hendrix, nothing. I mean, there's almost blues, right? What he does.
Yeah, but so Jimi Hendrix, a little bit more difficult to play. He's a
Mhm.
lot more difficult to play, obviously.
Okay.
So Voodoo Child, you could kind of get through some of that song, but when it got into the really heavy solo stuff, I mean,
Yeah.
he's just really untouchable.
Okay.
Really, I've never heard anybody who can play like Jimi Hendrix. I've heard many people do pretty good jobs of imitating Steve Ray Vaughan, but it's
Mhm.
really difficult to find somebody who can dial in Jimi Hendrix.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. So
You know,
what I also saw on YouTube, there was like BB King, one of the last, I think the 80th birthday was Slash and all the major players playing
yeah,
together.
I've seen that. I've seen that clip many. John Mayer was there.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. Everyone was really was very, how to call it. Um, they let BB King play. So this was his main role, and everyone
Of
just
course, don't
yeah,
upstage BB,
yeah,
right?
yeah, exactly, exactly. So interesting,
Just
huh?
lay back a little bit.
Yeah,
Don't pull out your best licks.
yeah, exactly.
Give him a few, right? Don't steal the show.
And you still play guitar?
Yeah, I do. I stopped playing blues primarily because I was only playing blues, and I wanted to force myself to learn other things. I had gotten into jazz, and I'm still into jazz,
Okay,
and so I started taking jazz guitar lessons when I was on my 30th birthday. And I
okay,
took them for about 10 years, and my guitar teacher, he's just about to leave. So, we started the business, and I stopped taking lessons because I was on the
yeah,
road all the time.
yeah,
And when the pandemic hit, and I was finally home again, I was like, oh, when this is over, first thing I'm going to go do is take lessons again. And but then my teacher, he's moving to the East Coast, so
oh,
I was
okay,
heartbroken to learn that I wasn't going to be able to do that with him again. So I might find well we'll see how things go. But I play quite a bit when when I was traveling quite a bit. I was always bringing a travel guitar, and I ended up breaking quite a few of them.
But you never
Uh,
played with the null pointers, right? Java one.
I don't really like to perform
Ah,
so
okay,
much.
okay, interesting.
I did when I was younger. I had a few gigs, and we would play out a couple times.
Hmm.
But I really liked because of the all my best musical experiences were in our studio space,
Hmm.
and because there were so many people up in that area, you could get a drummer or bass player together pretty quickly,
Hmm.
and so all the best musical experiences were with rooms of 10 people
Hmm.
tops, and so but most of them were playing,
Yeah.
so it was just like really intimate.
Hmm.
And so that's what I really prefer. I really like it when the party winds down and there's just like the last dozen people left over, or so on, and then I might bring the guitar out and we might have some fun and play around. I like to play with the radio or something like that. My favorite thing is like to play by ear. So, someone will I'll just like put on whatever music that you like, and I'll try to play with it, and see see what happens.
Then you have to be pretty good to do so, right? Not that easy.
You get better at it. Like if the music doesn't change keys, it's pretty easy to do.
Okay.
Because it's just the same 7 notes. Okay. And process of elimination, and blues is even easier. It's just 5 notes, right? With the blue note, and there's like 6, but it's always in the same spot. So So now if they're changing keys, that's a whole different deal, right? So there's like Beatles change keys all the time. Or they're just they do a lot of chromatic stuff and it's really difficult. I mean, you can get it, but you can't always just do it by ear. You got to actually sit and work at it.
Okay.
Stevie Wonder, he's just crazy with changing keys. Beach Boys surprisingly changed keys quite a lot. Like Good Vibrations is like insane. Song musically, it's just crazy. It's just always changing.
So you enjoyed when the music's over, right? So everything was quiet and you could start playing. End of the parties.
Yeah, end of the party stuff is when the party starts for me. Right?
Yeah, okay.
That's the best time of the night for an introvert.
Yeah.
When things kind of get to be more manageable.
Yeah, true. So how you got into computers? So I assume you played guitar. What happened then? I mean,
well, it's an interesting story. So I went into college for psychology. Okay. I had 1 year of college. I was working the entire year, so I wasn't the best student to begin with. I've never been a good student. I've pretty much failed almost everything that I've ever tried with formal education, and I have never really met eye to eye. So after my first year of college, which I did not pass, I had been trying to get a grant, some financial aid, some student aid, because I couldn't really afford to go because my parents weren't able to contribute anything to that. So I was working to pay for my school. It didn't really help me be a better student because I wasn't a good one to begin with, and I was working full time as a cook. I was cooking in a restaurant for the whole time.
So were you a good cook, or someone got poisoned?
No, I was a good cook. Not at first, but I became a good cook.
Okay.
I was a really terrible cook at first because I was way too slow. So my financial aid that I've been applying for the whole year came through at the end of the year for that year.
Okay.
When I didn't need it anymore. I had already paid for school. So my friend was like, "Hey, do you want to go to Ecuador?" And so I decided, all right, that sounds cool. So my financial aid that I got was like $5,000. So I spent $2,500 on a computer, and I spent $2,500 on a trip to Ecuador.
Why computer?
Well, because of you can. Well, for school, one.
Okay.
Everything was starting to already be type this up and that. So doing schoolwork definitely with that, but also you can do lots of stuff with computers like music. And I had been exposed to computers my whole life, so I knew they were valuable, right? The internet was starting to be a thing at that time as well. So I had my first email address was University of River Falls, Wisconsin email address. It was not like Yahoo or anything like that. That didn't come around until later. Back then it was like Hotmail, but anyway, so I got a computer and a trip to Ecuador, and now I'm in software, and I'm married to an Ecuadorian. So I guess that was like the most valuable $5,000 that has ever landed in my hands.
Yeah, I don't know whether you had the opportunity to listen to your wife's podcast with me, but it turned out that she's the geek now, and you were the businessman.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was in psychology, and she had studied software. She had studied programming a little bit.
Yeah, exactly.
So when I was in Ecuador, I realized that I really loved traveling.
Okay.
And I sat down and I did the math one day because I woke up and I was like, this is so awesome. My trip is almost over. I was there for 2 months. My trip is almost over. And I just failed my first year of school, so I'm going to have to do that again. So I'm going to have got 4 more years of college.
Mm-hmm.
Then, if you want to get a job in psychology, you need to have a doctorate. And so that's another 4 more years of school. Then you have to establish a practice. And so you're looking at another handful of years to establish a practice.
Mm-hmm.
So, the math was at the end of 12 years, more or less, my reward is I'll have a practice in one town. And if I want to move, I got to do it all. I got to do at least 5 of those years again. There's going to be at least 5 tough years reestablishing a new practice somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like the most landlocked job that you could possibly get practically.
Mm-hmm.
Dentist is also pretty bad. But yeah, so I was like, this is not for me.
Mm-hmm.
I can't continue down this path. Like I won't be doing any traveling. And when I'm done, I'll barely have any, I'm stuck in the city where I choose, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my friend John, the one I talked about earlier, that we did all of our creative stuff together, he got into software development, and he was in he went to a 9-month program where you learned one language each month,
Mm-hmm.
and then at the end of that, he got a great job immediately.
Okay.
And it was like, and when I was there in Ecuador, I had met a guy from Germany who was a software developer, and he was like, yeah, I do this every year. I take, some time off, and I just go travel the world, and then I go back and I work some more, and it's great because my job allows me to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, put the two together, and I was like, okay, software it is for me. So I'm gonna get in, I'm gonna go learn to program, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I did. I when I got back from Ecuador, I started getting into web page design and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I did join that vote. I went to school at Brown Institute in Minnesota, which is like a vocational school that those the one my friend went to, and I was there for 3 months before I ended up getting into a car accident and not being able to finish. But at least I was getting A's for the first time in my life at something.
Okay.
So I did really well in that class. We learned basic, then Visual Basic, then database and SQL and stuff like that. So that was the first 3 months. And it was good for me because it wasn't multiple things at the same time. I have a personality where if I'm really into something, it's the only thing that exists. And so standard school where you got to juggle a lot of classes is totally antithetical to how I work, whether I like it or not.
Yeah.
So when I was doing these things in high school, like making movies or special effects makeup or something like that, the class, anytime they gave you hey, here's a you make up your own assignment, it's due by this, you kind of have to, I would take whatever hobby I was into, I would make that my assignment, and then that was, of course, we get a beyond A on the project, but fail everything else.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it was good because I got to focus on one thing at a time, which is really fantastic. So it was like an entire month of programming in one language, beginning of the day to the end of the day, like a job, like you do in an actual profession. So it was really fantastic. So I did really great. The problem is that I was still working because I had to pay for all of this stuff myself. And so I was starting to work for a consulting company, a small one in my hometown. His wife was a congresswoman. And so he had a lot of connections and a lot of friends, and he did photography and stuff like that as well. So he had a couple college kids that he employed, and he would go find work and hand it out to us, and we would do it. I would do random computer things like fix people's printers, make menus for restaurants in Photoshop, start doing website design and graphic stuff. So it really was kind of convenient for me because I was already into art. So like web page design or HTML, like it was good for me because I was fine in Photoshop. I was very comfortable. So it was like, back then you had to do everything yourself. You were the graphic artist. You were the HTML person. There was no CSS.
Webmaster. You were the webmaster.
You were the webmaster, yeah. So I did that while I was in school, and so my third month there, when we were in the whole database SQL topic, I wasn't keeping up because I was working, and so it was the kind of thing though that you just had one test at the end of the month, and if you passed the test, you passed the class. So that test was like your grade. So I crammed and crammed and crammed and took the test and passed it, but I hadn't slept for 3 days.
Uh-huh.
And so I went in, aced my test, and on my way back, I fell asleep on the road, and I hit a semi. So I was driving down. I was really lucky the way I hit it. So a semi truck is, those big trucks that haul stuff across the country, like those really big trucks.
The Max, the
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why they're called semi? Why they're called semi?
I don't know.
Semi trucks is like almost a truck, right? So, I mean,
yeah, it's way more than a truck.
Yeah.
I don't know why they're called semi trucks. I guess someone can go Google that and let us know in comments or something.
This is like the trucks from the Bandit movie, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Smokey and the Bandit.
Smokey and the Bandit. Those type of trucks. Yeah, the trucks for hauling across the country.
Crazy. And you hit the truck.
Yeah, I hit one. So it was we were going the same direction. The truck had 2 trailers on it.
Okay.
So it was hauling doubles, right? So it had 2 trailers on it, which is even longer and bigger and heavier and more dangerous than when it just has 1 trailer. I hit it in about the best way you possibly could with the most optimal vehicle you could hit a semi truck with.
Okay.
So I was driving a minivan, so it couldn't go under the truck.
Okay.
And I fell asleep, and I slowly got sucked into the air that was the suction of the truck, right?
Yeah.
So all the wind's going by this thing, and it's and it's carrying doubles, so the wind picks up speed as it goes through, and it just slowly sucked me in, and I hit it where these 2 trailers connected. So on the back of a semi truck, there are 2 tires. And on the trailer, there's 2 tires and 2 tires, right? So there was a row of 4 tires because that was where the 2 trailers connected. So I hit it right in that row of 4 tires. Okay. So my car got basically lifted into the air once it was a minivan that had like foot railings so you could get in and out easy. The foot railing caught the tire, lifted the van up, about a bit, and then just boom, threw it right back down on the ground because, of course, the tire is moving in a circle. So lifted me up and bam, smacked me back on the ground and woke me up. And I pull over to the side of the road, and the semi truck driver tire one of them has a big slash through it and it's completely ruined my minivan. It was my dad's minivan. Okay. Just really scratched up and dented and kind of crushed up a little bit on that side. Other than that, it was fine. And the semi driver was fine, and everybody was fine. So it was really, really lucky. But it meant I didn't have a vehicle to go to school in. So
what the truck driver said to you? Was it the idea?
Well, so I was honest because that's me. So I said, "Oh man, I fell asleep. I was I was studying for days to take a test, and I took the test, and I just fell asleep. I don't know. I'm so sorry. I don't And the truck driver was so very understanding, and because semi drivers, they have to deal with sleep deprivation all the time. Yeah, that's the job, right? And so, he was super, super, super nice to me about it. He didn't report it. That there, a police officer did come to the site and got statements from everybody, but he didn't, file a report. Really, I mean, he didn't file a report. He didn't claim it. He didn't have he didn't get the company's insurance involved. He just said, it's all right. I'll take care of it on my end. And so I was really, really lucky. Didn't get hurt. No financial issues, no insurance, anything like that. Just couldn't go to school. So I end up staying working.
Why not? Because your van was okay, right? Kind of, or was it
not drivable?
Okay.
It was my dad's van, so he was like,
Okay.
If you give a kid something and they hurt themselves with it, you don't keep giving them the thing, right?
One strategy. The other could be, now we have it again and don't do it again. There could be two strategies, right?
Well, that's potentially true, but like if your kid hits a semi truck with your vehicle, you're not really going to go like, hey, let's get you back on the road as quickly as possible.
Okay.
I almost lost you, but hey, let's get you on the road. Thank goodness you didn't die, but you did hit a semi.
Yeah.
So that was fine. It worked out. It was during the boom, right? This was like 97 when this all went down. So it was during the boom, and there was plenty of work to be had if you could do anything with computers at all. Not like it is now. Like now you have to be super qualified, but back then I was really super lucky for someone who basically failed all formal education that he ever attempted and even didn't finish a VOTEC course. I was born at the right time to be a failure in school. So, like back in the late 90s, computers were going so crazy. And the internet specifically was booming up so much. There was a tech boom that if you could touch a computer and get something to be produced out of it, you could get a job. So I just continued to work. I eventually started a company. So the guy that I was consulting for, one of his customers, one of his clients, was having me build them a website, and they were having a difficult time just getting in contact with the guy who was the owner of the consulting company, and they just said to me, "Hey, David, you're doing all the work. Why don't we just work with you directly?" And I was like, okay. So the guy who was the owner of that company was his name was Charlie Brown, which is like the Peanuts character.
Yeah, exactly.
And he heard that all the time, but he was a really nice guy, and the company was like Brown Seeds corn, and they did peanuts. Like they did genetic testing on corn. Anyway, so he was super nice. He was a family-owned business, and so he took the business over from his dad, and he basically kind of took me under his wing, and he taught me how to start a business, and he taught me how trademark works, and to get the name trademarked, and how to file the paperwork to legally incorporate. Gave me legal advice. So I kind of went through business school with him.
What was the name of your company?
iWeb.
iWeb. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And yeah. That later became an Apple product, but
exactly.
But it was before any of that. So yeah, it was before the I series of anything. Interestingly enough, I was working with Apple for a bit in those early days when so later on. Well, anyway, I'll finish this lot of stories. I'll finish the one that I'm on. So I had like myself and two other friends working in this company, and we were doing websites for various places around the area, which weren't too many. And so we did pretty well for about a year and a half before we eventually ran out of work and then ran out of money.
2000?
No, it was earlier than that. It was like 98.
Okay.
To early 99. And so when the work ran out, I had slowly gotten... most of the stuff that I did was like graphic arts and Photoshop. That's more I spent most of my time. So I wasn't really doing much programming. HTML that is not a programming language. So I was doing a lot of that and Photoshop. And I did some types of like JavaScript stuff, just very, very minimal. Like I had this thing where I was doing a rollover effect. So you put your mouse over you put your mouse over stuff and it would like change and lift and
on mouse over. You had to do this back then because CSS was not capable. So you had exactly replace images on mouse over and stuff like that. This was like the basic skills. Lots of inlining of JavaScript.
Yeah, but it was really old JavaScript stuff. I mean, it was like there wasn't any, it wasn't jQuery or anything
No,
like that. It
no.
was like
Hmm.
super ancient.
Hmm.
Anyways, I did some stuff like that. But when we ran out of business, when we ran out of money and ran out of customers, we packed it in, and uh, I ended up getting a job consulting, but I got the job in the most interesting way. Like I understood that I had a lot to learn. Well, first of all, I wanted to know what I should do next.
Hmm.
So Java was pretty big at the time, and I
Hmm.
kind of wanted to know, what my earning potential was. I wanted to know what my earning potential would be if I were to learn Java.
Hmm.
So what I did was I, you know, went through the want ads of a bunch of other states,
Hmm.
and I wrote them. Uh, I wrote those companies emails basically saying, I am a business and I want to hire a Java developer. How
Hmm.
much should I expect to pay?
Smart. Okay.
Right. And so I got a whole bunch of,
Hmm.
information on what would be kind of,
Hmm.
the salary. It was around 80K at that
Hmm.
time in 1998.
Hmm.
And then I went and found all of the companies in the area that were looking for Java developers. And I sent them all my resume, and then I called each and every single one of them, like within 2 hours of having sent my resume.
Hmm.
Yeah, you could do this back then. Now, if you do that, people will shut you down.
Hmm.
But back then, it was like looking for help online was still a very new thing,
Hmm.
and so it was very informal. So I sent my resume out to like 40 different places, and of course I wrote I wrote something to like pull in Visual Basic to like screen scrape all the data out and stuff like that, and like make myself a little Excel spreadsheet of all the things, and I ticked through it one by one, and uh, and eventually, when I went when I went to interview with them, I was like, I don't program in Java. I'm looking for, but I can in Visual Basic, and so I can do work in that. And I'm looking for some place that will like, train me.
Hmm.
So, what's your training program like here?
Hmm.
So it was really kind of crazy because when I was going in for interviews, people would be like, trying to do that angle of, yeah, well, maybe, you're not so experienced, so maybe we can't give you such a great salary. And they're interviewing you in the standard format and, trying to trying to size you up and all that stuff. But I was like, I don't, I was flipping the script on them. I was interviewing them. What's your training like? What do you do for your employees? I'm looking to learn. I don't care what you pay me as long as you can train me, right?
Hmm.
So like when they don't have the ability to negotiate salary because I don't care and I just care about what I can learn. They didn't walk into the room prepared for that.
Yeah.
So like most people would you know either just tell me to go away because it wasn't a good fit because they
Hmm.
weren't looking to train anybody. They just wanted somebody they could put into work immediately. In which case, fine. But I eventually ended up with like 3 different places that actually did have interest in growing the people that they hired, and so I went with the best one, and I learned Java that year. They paid me to go take a week-long intensive course in Java,
Which
and
version do you remember?
yeah, it was 1.1.
On one. Okay.
The core Yeah, the course was 1.0,
Hmm.
but well, the course was 1.0, but they hadn't updated it, but I ended up going into working with 1.1.
Hmm. And you like
And
Java comparing to Visual Basic?
well, yeah, a lot. I mean, it was, much more fun. Visual Basic, at the time, if you were a beginner, I guess it would have been perceived nice because you had a nice IDE and all your environment was nicely taken care of.
Exactly.
But I kind of liked the more wild west,
Okay.
find an IDE that works, scrape
Hmm.
around, it was, you know, uh, and so I kind of liked that aspect about it. The guy who taught me that course, that week long course, was Gary Cagle, and he was such a great teacher.
Okay.
And I wrote a game that week. So one of the things that they had that they learned you had to learn was AWT.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought that was really cool because I had kind of an art graphics
Mm-hmm.
background a little bit. So I really latched on to AWT, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. And I made a game called Pente, which I still have the game.
Okay.
And I as any fledgling developer, I over-engineered the heck out of it. Everything was
Is it on your Tomitribe or GitHub account, the game?
It's not, but I should put it up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know if I have the first version of it because I've rewritten it. So I mean, basically, at some point later on, I realized, man, I'd really over-engineered this thing, and it's when I got into IntelliJ, I was just like inline, and my program was like a third of the size.
Okay.
And I'm like, wow, yeah, I was really making a lot of stuff, but so that was really cool, and I did that. I ended up working as a consultant for that company. My first project was one where I was writing a web server.
Uh-huh.
I had to do this like security integration between this Visual Basic app and the Java app the rest of the team was working on. So I wasn't responsible initially for anything like hardcore Java related. They hired me because I understood Java, because I understood Visual Basic and a bit of Java. And so they wanted me to do an integration, and the app was a web app that did banking stuff. So did ACH clearing, like check payment type of things. And so I wrote this. I ended up figuring out the easiest way to do like a login between the both of them was to put up a web server, do the login, and hand the credentials to both systems. And so then I started writing a web server. So that really got me into like protocols and stuff like that. And it's really kind of how I got into, back-end stuff. And I remember my boss at the time, he's like, I was talking about this stuff, and he said, you should write an app server. And I laughed at him. I was like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard.
Were app server back then already known? I mean, they were, or remember, but
yeah. So there were some packages. There was like Hot Site was out there. I did some work in that for a bit. It was kind of a package. It was Java based, and you could write some code on it. And I wrote this thing that was like for another company that was a large food distributor for the whole world that's privately held, and they're based in Minnesota. And so I wrote this thing where it had like a remote control, looked like a remote control, and you could click, but I graphic up designed the remote control, and you could click buttons on it to like navigate around a map. And so it was this package, I believe it was called Hot Site, had kind of a mapping technology to it. Kind of like ArcGIS, from ESRI. So it had like a mapping component to it. So I used that. It was all Java based, and is at that time where my boss was like, "Well, you should write an app server," and I was like. Meanwhile, I hadn't even been programming Java a year, so like I laughed at him. Like I was like, "This is like, haha," like.
What I remember,
he was serious, but I was. What's that?
1998 around, there was a Jigsaw servlet engine. You remember that from Apache? No Apache, not Apache.
Yeah,
not Apache. Apache was JServe. It was W3C. So W3C, They had their own servlet engine. I had evaluated that. It was very early. It was Jigsaw, and Apache had JServe. This was the servlet engine from Apache. Yeah.
In 1998, I don't recall what the state of stuff was. It was happening at that time. I wasn't aware of it. And there was Silverstream, which was really, really popular in Minneapolis at the time. There was a Silverstream user group, and so that was really. They actually had an office near us. And so it was really big in the area at the time. I didn't end up using it. What we did at this place, this real first Java gig that I had was, like I say, it was with it was a bank from Minnesota that eventually got purchased, or actually was purchased by Wells Fargo.
Okay.
And so it was Norwest Bank of Minnesota, and we were working with them, and they actually purchased Wells Fargo, and the project got canceled.
Okay.
But it went on for about 2 years. I joined it a year in, so I was only there for the last year, and it was your standard Swing front end with Corba back end.
Of course.
And
Orbix or Visigenic? Orbix or Visigenic, you remember?
Big Serve.
Wow. Never heard about that.
No.
We only had either Orbix or Visigenic.
Visigenics. We did Visigenics.
Visigenics,
so,
okay.
Yeah, so I wouldn't use the other one, but Visigenics was the orb that we used.
Yeah, the other one was Orbix.
Yeah. I wasn't the Corba guy on that one. I was the Swing guy. So that was kind of when I started to understand the power of having the source code. So Swing had just come out, and it was an add-on library. It was like we used version 1.2, and it was an add-on library. It didn't come with the JVM at all because it was still 1.1.
com.sun.swing or com.sun. It was not even, they changed the namespace. At the beginning, it was like com.sun.swing or something like this.
Yeah. It wasn't under Java X at that time.
No.
It was a library that you could get separately, and the source code was available if you wanted to get it. So I was the new Java guy on the team. I didn't have much experience. My experience was there on that project. And when I wrapped up that whole writing the web server to doing the login thing, then they pulled me on to do some Swing work on this project. And I wasn't getting anywhere, so I went and grabbed the source code to figure out how to use Swing, right? Because they really wanted to do a lot of custom components and fancy UI stuff. And so, I had to go look at the source code for these components to figure out how to extend them, to figure out what is it going to take for me to get this event to show up, and how can I get it to be the right size, and when is the all the mousing events and all that stuff. So I was picking through the source code like crazy, and nobody else was doing that. They had a whole team of people who they were paying to do this work. They had at least 6 different people doing front end work with Swing on them, and none of them grabbed the source code. So quickly, I became the guy that everyone whose desks they went to ask the toughest questions. And I was like 20. I wasn't even legal drinking age in the United States. I had not even been programming Java for a year. And so it was a very, very crazy thing. So basically I was like, the expert Swing guy, only because I looked at the source code and nobody else was doing that. So yeah, it was one of the first moments of my career where I realized, working on something where you can see the source is like way, way, way better.
Or care about things.
Otherwise.
I mean, maybe the difference was you care about the thing, and you look at the source code. And if you go to something deep, you become good.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
You focus on the things, and the other guys, just try to do something.
Do the minimal work and get out of it.
Minimal work, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, what happened after that? So obviously, the company was bought, and what was your next gig?
Well, the next gig was I went to work for a company. So that project was, when it canceled, it was a $35 million project that got canceled. They spent $35 million in 2 years. And since I was like insane, you can get for $35 million, you can get 2 moon rovers.
Okay.
That's insane, right?
Yeah.
That was how things were back then, right? Anyway, so the next company I went to work for was a much smaller company. It wasn't a consulting company. They were a software company, and they wrote JDBC drivers for Postgres, and I forget the database that was a derivative of that.
Enterprise DB?
No, Ingress. Open Ingress. Yeah. And I don't know which one is the derivative of which, because all these database people basically it was 5 really prolific database people, and they would all change They would sell their code bases off to each other, to other companies. They would shift around to different companies. And it's all like this. It's crazy. That's a whole really interesting history. So we wrote database drivers, and these people were into like Linux and Unix really, really hardcore. And I was a Windows guy still. And so that was really the first time that I worked in a shell. They're like, hey, man, you need to have Cygwin on your machine. You need to learn how to program and you learn how to use Bash. And I thought it was hot stuff going into that job, because I had been in the previous gig, and it was a $35 million project. So I guess if you're hot stuff on a $35 million project, you're hot stuff, right? No, not at all. Those two things are not related one bit. So these two guys, they were about 12, 15 years older than me, and they, Mike and Dave, they were just prolific. I mean, still today, I'm just like, honored to have had the opportunity to work with them. They would say that about me now, but I still say it because they had really big impact on me. So I would go in and I would be hand coding things, like you do. You type characters into an IDE. That's how code is created. Not for them. No, they would write a Bash script or something in Perl that would generate the code that they wanted to create. So they would create a template for it, and then they would run a loop in Bash or Perl, and out comes 30 test cases for what they're trying to do, which was necessary because there's basically just the two of them wrote the JDBC driver for these databases, and it covered all the scenarios, all the left joins, right joins, you're not joins, but all the queries and all the different data types and all the different column types and how it can be defined this way and that way and the casting of this one to the other thing. So think about the matrix of testing you got to do for that. You need to be able to make sure that you've got you've got like 8 different strongly typed versions of one method. Get this column as an int, get this column as a boolean, get this column as a float, get this column as a long, get this column as a short, on and on and on. So they had to generate all this stuff in order for it to be possible. So they were just generating enormous amounts of code so that it could thoroughly test all of this stuff. And I was coding by hand, so I couldn't even keep up with these guys, like at all. It was not even a thing. So I started to get really, with their guidance and their help, started to get into Linux and Unix. I learned Perl and Bash.
Okay.
And I started to also generate.
How you like Perl?
I like it.
Okay.
It's got. I mean, I wouldn't work in it professionally.
Okay.
But it's fun. It's fun to have under the belt.
Well, because I never learned Perl. I always wanted whenever I had time to. So that's why I'm asking.
Well, my joke of Perl is their slogan is there's more than one way to do it, and then my slogan is there's more than one way to forget how to do it. Right? Okay. I could my experience with Perl was I could get when I was coding in it. Yeah. I could get some work done once okay, this is how you do an assignment. This is how you do a replacement, and all the operators, right? There's so many operators in Perl, and you put operators together, and then, whatever. It's a whole thing. I could never remember. Is it tilde equal or equal tilde, and then there's an M and a slash. I mean, this is how Perl works.
Hey, David, we should split the episode into 2. Do you have 1 hour time?
I do.
Then, where people can find you on the internet, and we can proceed with part 2. So now we conclude the part 1. Otherwise, it's going to be too long. So,
sure.
So now we have to reveal another secret. You are the CEO, CTO, or owner, or everything, maybe from Tomitribe, right?
Yep. So Tomitribe is a company that I started with my wonderful, beautiful wife, Amelia, back in 2012. We actually officially launched in 2013 at Java 1.
And where can people find you, the Tomitribe, on the internet?
Yep, it's Tomitribe, Tomitribe,
Okay.
So Tommy with a TOMI and tribe.com. And we do open source support for Apache Tommy, Tomcat, ActiveMQ. And we deal with a lot of really awesome people.
And what's your Twitter account?
D Blevins, DBLEVINS.
Perfect. So then we will start over in a few seconds, and for the listeners, in a few weeks maybe. So
sure.
So then, thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much, everybody.